Hey guys, what's up? It's Biscuit Bill Horror Reviews, and I'm here with a kind of, a video that I've kind of been wanting to do for a bit, but I didn't really know how I'd, kind of throw it together. Um, but, you know what? But you know what? Fuck it. We'll figure this out. So I kind of figured I'd just do kind of like what I did with my, worst and best horror films of the decade, of the last decade video that I did, where I just kind of freeform discussed different things. Um, so yeah, the kind of topic for this video is movies that I saw as a child, and I'm keeping this as the cutoff of like 13 to 14 years old, that I probably shouldn't have seen at such a young, impressionable age, but that I did anyway, and they probably had some kind of effect, turning me into the very, very goddamn young, very weird individual I am today. So I'm going to be starting from, I guess the most recent film out of like the 13 titles that I picked, to the oldest. So starting this off is Lars von Trier's Antichrist, which, to be completely fair, I didn't see in its entirety when I was like under 14. I didn't see it the whole thing until I was like 15 or 16 years old. However, I saw a bootleg copy of a couple of the most infamous scenes when I was like right when the movie came out. I remember this very vividly. I was very young. This was like right when the movie had come out, so I was probably around 11 or 12 years old. And one of my sister's best friends, one of my older sister's best friends at the time, had come over, and he had brought like a whole big ass CD case full of bootlegged movies that his father had burned onto discs. And one of them was a film called Antichrist, which he put in mainly just to show us like the most infamous scenes. And the main things I remember were the opening scene, where he gave his interpretation as the scene was happening of what this opening scene is, saying that the interpretation here is that the woman is an angel, and that Willem Dafoe's character is a demon, and they're fucking. I don't think that that's necessarily a good interpretation, but that was his interpretation. Anyway, we saw that scene with the baby falling out the window, as well as the infamous genital mutilation scenes. I just showed these things to somebody that was my age at the time, very young and impressionable, and that film really stuck with me because it had just come out. It was like a very recent release, and I'd never seen anything like it before. This wasn't the big film that like really pushed me over the edge into kind of weird art house extreme cinema, but it was this is definitely one of the influential films, and that's why I actually really like Antichrist, is this kind of weird nostalgia I have for it. Also because I genuinely think it's really well made, despite Lars von Trier being a bit of a pretentious jackass. Um, Also in 2009, we have the remake of My Bloody Valentine, which my parents took me to see when it came out, because we were going to go to the movies, and I wanted to see either the Notorious B.I.G. Biopic Notorious, or My Bloody Valentine. And I guess my parents figured it would be better for me to see My Bloody Valentine because I had seen other slasher films before. I had known about the original My Bloody Valentine for quite a bit, but I'd never seen it at that point. So when I saw this film, I was really like blown away by it. I didn't get to see it in 3D, but that was one of those films that really kicked off that like early 2010s 3D boom that was going on for quite a while. But I remember seeing it, and I remember specifically I was sitting next to my dad in the theater, and my mom was sitting next to him, and my older sister was sitting next to me. Um, and that sex scene in the film happened, which if you've seen My Bloody Valentine, you know about that sex scene. And my mom like elbowed my dad and made him cover my eyes for the scene, and I was like, "Oh, come on, pops! I'm trying to see the tits." I remember that, and I remember all of the really, really excessive gore of the film. And I remember thinking at the time that like this film is absolutely amazing. This is a perfect movie. I love it. Uh, After growing up, I was like, this movie's kind of garbage, but it's at least kind of entertaining, kind of interesting. It's got something going on. I can't remember who's in the cast, but there's like an old dude in the cast who I'm pretty sure is like kind of a legendary actor who they kind of suckered into being in the film, or maybe I'm remembering this wrong. I remember that I think it was one of the guys from Supernatural. Can't remember if it was Sam or Dean, but he was in that, and that's something else that kind of happened in like 2009 ish, with the Friday the 13th remake. Like these two classic slash films get remade, and both of the Supernatural guys are in both of them. I mean, they're not both in both films, but one of them is in fucking Friday the 13th, and one is in My Bloody Valentine. I always thought that was just like a really, really weird thing, but, my compassion, my love for the remake of My Bloody Valentine after it came out, when I saw it, grew quite a bit before deflating a bit, and then I saw the original and I was like, okay, this is absolutely amazing. This is much better. Another one, which this I would actually stand by, and I actually just want to say, I'm planning on eventually maybe doing a video on like really not overrated, but really overlooked, underrated, underappreciated direct-to-video, direct-to-DVD horror. Because I feel like people, when they say, oh, it's a direct-to-video horror film, they use that as an insult, which don't get me wrong. Like, direct-to-video horror is not great most of the time. It's not even good most of the time, but there are some real gems in there, I think. And this film is one of the ones that I saw that made me think, man, maybe direct to video horror ain't too bad. I'm talking about Rest Stop from, I think it's like Raw Feed Films, which was like this short-lived sub-label of, I think, like Warner Brothers, where they just basically released like horror films direct to video, direct to DVD. But this film Rest Stop, which was the first Raw Feed film, I remember seeing and being really confused by it because it's a very jumbled, messy movie. It's not really straightforward, and it's kind of just trash. But I remember seeing it and really, really liking how weird it was and how like offbeat the film felt. And to this day, I actually rewatched that film, I want to say a few months ago, maybe last year. I rewatched it for the first time in a very long time, and it was great. It was extremely nostalgic to watch that film again. But Rest Stop is like, I haven't been really giving you the plots to these movies, but it doesn't really matter. Rest Stop is like, this girl runs away from home with her boyfriend. She wants to be an actress. They run away to Hollywood. They stop at a rest stop. She goes to the bathroom. She comes back. Her boyfriend in the car is gone, and she's basically stranded there, being stalked by a guy in a yellow truck with the license plate KZL303. And there's also a RV full of like a weird religious family that keeps coming by the rest stop. It's a weird kind of torture porn, supernatural, surreal horror film. It's not great by most means, but like, I honestly think it's kind of an underrated movie. Like, not a lot of people like it. It did get a sequel, which is really cool that it got a sequel. The first Rest Stop is Rest Stop Dead Ahead, and the second one is Rest Stop Don't Look Back, which the second one is a major improvement in like every way. But it kind of gets it kind of removes the surreal kind of almost broken aspects, almost broken aspects of the first movie, which for a lot of people was a great thing. For me, it's all right. It's like about as good. I still quite like Rest Stop, and it's a movie that I cherish quite a bit, and I think people should give a shot. People should give a fair shot. Is another one. This next one, goddamn, this is one that I saw like right when it hit DVD, and I probably shouldn't have seen it when it hit DVD. I think this film is like from 2004. Yeah, from 2004, which I would have been about 7 or 8 years old at the time. Um, the Butterfly Effect, starring Ashton Kutcher. This movie's not necessarily too good either. It's another case of like I saw it when I was young, so I have some nostalgia for it, and I have kind of a weird latent respect for it. But I remember when this film came out, my parents, for some fucking reason, in their infinite wisdom, let me watch it. They wouldn't let me watch a lot of like really crazy movies when I was young, but one of the ones they let me watch for some reason was fucking The Butterfly Effect. The things I remember about this movie right off the bat that I like will always remember till the day I die is the weird like sociopathic kid who kills that dog. I remember the scenes of like child abuse. When I saw those as a kid, I was like, I didn't know how to process what was going on in those scenes, so I couldn't really understand it. I just remember feeling very uncomfortable. The scene where the kids go see Seven, David Fincher's Seven, in the theater, I remember that, and I remember specifically my aunt telling me when we were watching it that she's seen that movie before and that it's a really good movie. But The Butterfly Effect is an interesting movie because it's like a weird mix of psychological and science fiction horror elements. Basically just about a guy who who has all these kind of traumatic things that he's repressed, and he realizes that through reading his childhood diaries, he can travel back in time and relive those things, and through doing so, he tries to change his past and make his and everybody else's lives better, but ends up making all of their lives a lot fucking worse as a result. You know, it's an interesting movie. It's not necessarily good. It's like pretty much just torture porn. And it has like every uncomfortable, vile thing you could possibly think of in it. You know, child abuse, rape, drug use. I'm pretty sure there's drug use in there. You know, murder, emotional fucking suffering and abuse. It's just entirely not a pleasant or fun time. And yeah, that's The Butterfly Effect. Next is 13 Ghosts, the remake of 13 Ghosts from like 2002. This one I will never forget the first time I watched this, because when I first watched it, I saw it on cable, and it was cut down a little bit, but I remember seeing it on cable. It was on like Sci-Fi or something like that, and this was like really, 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 really long time ago. But I remember like my mom was going to go to the store, and I wanted to go with her, and this was on cable, and I got caught up watching it, and instead of just going to the store without me, I specifically remember my mom sitting and watching it with me, because she had seen it before. I had never seen it, and I sat and watched it with my mom and my aunt. I think my siblings might have been there too. Yeah, the remake of 13 Ghosts is like vastly different from the original film. The original film is kind of cheesy and stupid, but like it's extremely fun, and I think there's some legit atmosphere there. But for the most part, you know, it's not super duper scary. This remake isn't too scary either, but like the designs of the ghosts are really cool. I really like that it's like a big ass glass house covered in like, you know, spells to stop the ghosts from getting through. The film basically, very simply, has to do with this guy who his wife dies, tragically, and he ends up inheriting a giant glass mansion from his uncle who dies, and the house happens to contain 13 different ghosts that he has captured and collected and has them all in their own cells. And when they unlock and go into the house, they start this process of all of the ghosts one by one being let out of their fucking pens. Honestly, like, this concept could be really, really great for an actual, like, good horror film. If handled by somebody that's maybe has a bit more skill. But as is, I still actually quite like 13 Ghosts. It's very, very fun. It's very enjoyable. It's just a real guilty pleasure for me personally. We also got fucking Aftermath from 1994. This one I saw the year before, like the summer before I started my freshman year of high school. I remember I saw this movie, and it made me vomit. And no other film has done that to me really since. And no film had ever done that to me before, and that's one of the big reasons that I'm into, like, kind of extreme, underground, disturbing, edgy horror, is because I saw Aftermath at an impressionable age, an impressionable age. Aftermath is basically just a 30-minute long short film about a guy who fucks a corpse. It's not pleasant. It's not fun. I have told many a story about when I first saw this film. And I first saw it because I was looking for, like, I had recently learned about the existence of Cannibal Holocaust, and I was like, man, like, that movie sounds really fucked up. I wonder if there's anything worse than that. And I remember, like, looking at the most disturbing movies ever made and clicking on, like, one of the first results. And one of the first results said that Aftermath was number one. So I was like, alright, let's find Aftermath. It happened to be on Netflix streaming at the time. So I watched it, and it was a very bad mistake. Speaking of Netflix streaming, another movie that I saw, thanks to Netflix having a very weird selection of titles on their streaming service very early on when they started streaming, is a little movie called Revenge of the Living Dead Girls, which recently just got a standard edition Blu-ray release from Severin Films. They already did, like, a limited edition, which I own that one. But they just released a standard edition without all the special features. But I bought the Blu-ray from Severin, and I rewatched it, and I was like, God damn, this is just as, like, fucking disgusting as I remember. But at the same time, like, now that I've seen things that are a lot worse, this really isn't as bad by comparison. But Revenge of the Living Dead Girls is an interesting movie. It's not a good movie. It's a weird mix of, like, sexploitation and zombie films and gore films. It's a French kind of zombie movie, basically about these three women who are killed after they drink milk that is, like, got, like, a chemical in it, and it kills them. And then the company that was trying to get rid of the chemical by pouring it in the milk accidentally dump it onto their graves. And they come back, like, they climb out of their graves every night over and over and over again to find the people responsible for their deaths and kill them. And there's specifically, like, a zombie lesbian orgy where a woman gets stabbed in the vagina with a sword. I remember seeing that when I was, like, fucking 11 or 12 years old, and thinking that was the most disgusting, horrific thing I'd ever seen in my goddamn life. There is a scene in here involving, like, infant mortality that's also pretty disturbing. really, this film overall isn't pleasant, and is just kind of a big sleaze fest. But you know, it's a film I'm a little bit nostalgic for. We also got the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, which I remember I came home from school. I was in like elementary school at the time, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 was on cable. And I remember watching it, and the few things I never remembered much from it. I remember like thinking what I had seen from it was like really weird, but the big things that I had seen that I remembered until I eventually saw the film when I was probably like 13 or 14 in its entirety. The big things that I remembered from the film were was the scene with the cook like having people sample his chili, and somebody finds a tooth in their chili and he's like, oh, that's just one of those hard shell peppercorns. And I remember like I didn't get the joke, and then my aunt who was watching it and that she was why it was on TV said like, oh, it's a tooth, they're making chili out of people. I remember that. I don't remember seeing any of the scenes with like Chop Top and Leatherface in the fucking uh, radio station or anything like that. But I do remember seeing those fucking. But I do remember seeing the scene where Dennis Hopper runs into the Texas Battleland with a chainsaw, screaming like a madman, and he sees like blood leaking from the wall, and he kicks it open, and a bunch of raw meat and like flesh and organs fly out, and I always remember that being like, you know, something that stuck in my memory as that was something that always stuck in my memory as like, hey, this is kind of not, you know, this is kind of something that you maybe shouldn't be seeing, but I saw it anyway, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is my favorite Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. It's better than the original. Don't at me. Moving on. We also got The Toxic Avenger, which this is a movie I saw when I was in middle school that really blew me away. What's funny is I had seen things that were like probably just as gory, about as gory as that film was, at the time. And I remember I rented it from Netflix. I got the DVD in the mail, and I watched it. And it said at the beginning like, "Oh, it contains scenes of extreme violence." And I watched this movie, and I was absolutely blown away by how weird, wacky, wild, over-the-top, ridiculous, lowbrow, and crazy this movie was. I remember the head-crushing scene really making me feel ill, and, you know, I just remember thinking to myself at the time, like, this is it. This is the goriest movie I've ever seen. This is it. But, like, by that point, I don't want to say I'd seen a lot of, like, really horrible stuff, but, like, by that point, I definitely saw Revenge of the Living Dead Girls before that. Not that that film is as gory, but, like, you know, that one's a lot more guttural, a lot more gross. You know, Toxic Avenger is a bit more lighthearted, even when it comes to its gore. But, yeah, I loved the Toxic Avenger, and then I eventually got around to, in that same year, I got around to seeing Class of Nukem High, which I also absolutely adored, and Poultrygeist, Night of the Chicken Dead, which is another film that is among my favorites. Love Poultrygeist, and I happened to watch that film the same night that I saw Cannibal Holocaust for the first time. So that night was just a buffet of, like, really horrible shit that I should not have seen at that age. Next is The Thing. I've talked about The Thing a few times on my channel, I think. It's one of my favorite movies, John Carpenter, classic. I think it's one of John Carpenter's best movies. The Thing is you know, it's. Do I really need to recount the plot of The Thing? I feel like that's kind of a well-known enough movie. But either way, I remember seeing The Thing. One time I was at my cousin's house out in the middle of nowhere, and we were like looking for something to watch on cable, and we saw The Thing was on. Well, my cousin did, and she was like, "Oh, The Thing is on." And I'm like, "What's The Thing?" And she said that it's about like a spider from outer space or something like that. And weirdly enough, when they turned on that channel and turned on The Thing, it was the chest defibrillation scene with the spider severed head. And I remember, like seeing before that part when they're like, playing pool and stuff. I remember seeing that and thinking like, oh, so these people are like at a bar, they're chilling out, and then this guy has a heart attack, and I'm like, what the fuck's going on? And they do the chest defibrillation, and the guy's chest opens and bites off the dude's arms, and I was like, I started fucking screaming and crying. I was very, very young. I was probably about 6 or 7 years old at this point. And, like, I was just fucking losing my shit. And they decided not to change the channel until the scene was over and the head crab, the head spider, was crawling away. And that absolutely, like, fucking ruined me. And I always had, like, an obsession with The Thing after that. Because, like, it was something I saw that really fucked with me, really disturbed me, really stuck with me. And none of my friends growing up knew about this film. So I kind of assumed that this was this super overlooked, underrated, forgotten gem of the horror genre. Every time it was on cable, which I remember when I was a kid, it aired all the time on like Sci-Fi. I swear, it used to air all the time. I would DVR it every single time, and I would watch it on repeat, on loop, every single time it aired, because I found the film just so interesting. And I'll never forget when I finally got a copy of The Thing. I watched it so many times, and then I lent it to somebody, and I never saw it again. And then I bought another copy, another like cheap $5 bargain bin DVD copy, and I watched that a million times. And then I bought the Blu-ray from Scream Factory. The Thing is just one of those movies with me. I love it. Next, we got another film that is like a movie that I love. I believe is perfect. I believe is great. I'm talking about The Evil Dead, the classic Sam Raimi film. Which, shit. This movie, I remember I saw this movie because I was looking for something to watch on Netflix, and I was like flipping through, and I had heard about The Evil Dead in passing. I had already seen Army of Darkness at that point in my life, but didn't know it was a sequel to anything. But I saw Army of Darkness at that point in my life and everything, and I was like, Evil Dead. I'd heard about that before, and I watched it, and I got up until the tree rape scene, and I turned it off because I was just so disturbed. I was so scared. That movie fucking horrified me when I was young, and it became another situation similar to The Thing, where every time it aired on cable, which was around Halloween, I would DVR it, I would watch it. I loved that movie. I watched it all the damn time after that. And I genuinely think the film still holds some emotional power and some ability to shock and disturb, because to this day, I rewatched Evil Dead very recently, like a couple weeks ago, for the first time in a few years, and I was just still getting chills from that fucking movie. And it's just so fucking good. I mean, I don't want to sit here and tell you what you already know. Everybody knows that Evil Dead is great. Let's move on. Next is the big one, Cannibal Holocaust. Like I said, I saw this the summer before I started high school. I was like 14 when I saw it. And I didn't really get why it was so disturbing. Like, I'd sat and watched it, I saw the animal killings, I saw the really explicit rape scenes and gore and just super transgressive shit in this film. And I remember thinking to myself, this isn't that bad, what's going on here? With subsequent rewatches, the film grew on me a bit more, and I genuinely think Cannibal Holocaust is a really great movie, despite a lot of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, despite the director being a bit of a creep, towards the lead actress, despite the animal killings, despite all of that. I still think it's a genuinely really powerful um, piece of cinema. It is an exploitation film first and a meaningful film second. I feel like the meaningful nature of it is just kind of like tacked on, most definitely, so that way people who like it can kind of justify their sadistic tastes by saying, no, see, it's about humanity, which is exactly what I like. I definitely am one of those people who kind of justify it by saying, oh, see, it's about mankind. But I realize that the film is not pleasant, it's not fun, it's not necessarily a film to defend, but I honestly think it's a pretty fucked up, transgressive, disturbing, like legitimately scary, and just discomfort and anxiety inducing film. And that's what you want out of a horror film. It's not a film I would recommend people see at all. And it's not a movie for normal people. It is a movie for people like me who believe Salò is like a masterpiece, for example. It's not for the average moviegoer. That being said, I still really like Cannibal Holocaust. I own it on Blu-ray. I got the soundtrack. Like I can't sit here and act like I'm not somebody who considers it one of their favorite movies, because I do consider it to be one of my all-time favorites. Now we're on to the last movie, which is another one that's kind of a movie that, like, it's a movie that I believe has aged, like, very well and also very poorly. I'm, of course, talking about I Drink Your Blood from 1972. This film is basically like a zombie slasher type movie that is inspired by the Manson murders. About a group of satanic hippies who go into this small town and they rape and victimize a young girl that lives there. And their grandfather goes after them. The grandfather, they force feed him LSD, and to get revenge, the grandson, who is the brother to the girl who is assaulted, kills a rabid dog and puts its blood in meat pies that they then sell to the hippies, resulting in the hippies becoming rabies-infested, cannibalistic killers. I remember seeing this movie as a kid and thinking to myself, not a kid, but like, I was probably about 13 at the time, I saw a really cut down, like, shitty, unrestored version of it, and I remember thinking to myself, man, this movie really isn't that, like, it isn't as crazy or disturbing as the trailers made it out to be. Like, this is super cheesy and dumb and not really that entertaining or fun or interesting. And that's because I was seeing this, like, really cut down version. Upon seeing the uncut version, finally, which, keep in mind, like, this cut version that I saw when I was a kid, I remember thinking to myself, this is not good. But I would rewatch it. I don't know why I would rewatch it, but I rewatched it so much. And it really grew on me, this cut down, like, shitty version. Like, something about its, like, weird, like, over-the-top, ridiculous nature in both its plotting and, like, how the whole film turns out, as well as the trailer, which is, like, one of the greatest trailers in cinema history. It wasn't until the Blu-ray dropped that I finally saw the uncut version, fully restored and everything, and I remember, like, thinking to myself as I was watching it, like, goddamn, this still holds up as extremely brutal and disturbing and horrific to this day. Like, despite a lot of the things aging poorly, despite the acting not being good, despite the writing not being good, despite the plot being really over the top, despite some of the gore effects maybe not being too good and aging poorly, this film is still really fucked up. Like, extremely. And I remember I went to a screening of the film, and at the screening, I mean, the audience was, like, legitimately fucking horrified by the entire thing. And this was an audience of people that I would assume had seen the movie before, because this was at a cult film convention, and they were doing a reunion of the cast of the film. And I remember watching it in this screening, and like people were like legit fucking, reacting as you would expect them to in a, you know, old grindhouse theater in the 70s. Like they were giving genuine reactions of disgust and shock and terror, and I think that that's cool. I think the film has aged pretty well in terms of its like, you know, disturbing nature and content. Like it's still a pretty disturbing movie. You see old grindhouse film trailers, old exploitation film trailers, and you look at them, and they never live up to like what the trailer gives you. They more often than not end up being not really good at all. They end up being maybe even a bit boring. Old exploitation film trailers are amazing because they're so fucking well produced. Maybe not well produced, but they're so interesting and ridiculous. And they just promise so much, but they rarely ever really deliver on that promise of all of these crazy things. Yet, I Drink Your Blood delivers all of that and more, I think, with its trailer. Like, its trailer is amazing. I love it. And honestly, just the film all over, I think is really, really great. Not in a genuine, like, critical way, but in more of a, like, hey, if you like exploitation films, this is, like, the cream of the fucking crop right here. It's also, like, the only movie, or at least the first movie, to ever be rated X strictly for the violence, which, for the time is absolutely insane. Because, like, there are really violent mainstream horror films that are made these days that, arguably are as disturbing or as graphic as, I Drink Your Blood. But, like, even then, I Drink Your Blood, I think, would still hold a hard R. Most definitely mainly for its violence, because it's just fucking wow, man. But, yeah, that's kind of really it for this video. I didn't want to do anything too extravagant or, amazing or, not even necessarily well produced for this. I just kind of wanted to do a video, like a retrospective, talking about experiences I had when I was a kid, seeing movies that I most definitely should not have seen as a kid. That being said, I have a very large list. I say very large, I think it's like 200 movies on my Letterboxd account, which you can find my Letterboxd account in the link below in the description. Where I've compiled a list of movies that I saw as a kid that I probably shouldn't have, and it's not just horror films. There are sex comedies on there. There are, all kinds of stuff. I put, like, there's, like, Fritz the Cat on there, and Cheech and Chong's Up in Smoke is on there, for example. But it's a very big list of just movies I saw at a very young age that I probably shouldn't have. And if you want me to do another one of these kinds of videos, kind of a retrospective, kind of just discussion, talking about my history with these kinds of movies, let me know in the comments, because I'd love to. I would honestly really like to do it again. It's not super hard content to produce, and which is good for my fucking mental health this year, and it's also something that I kind of like to talk about. It's it's interesting and fun to produce, at least, well, maybe not interesting to me, but it's fun to produce for me, because it's just going down memory lane. But that's it for now, guys. Yeah. Anyway, this is Biscuit Boot Horror Reviews, signing off. Peace.